When I was 12 years old during a school field trip, something happened that stayed with me for the rest of my life. We were on a bus, just a bunch of kids, loud as usual, messing around, talking over each other, the normal kind of chaos you'd expect on a school trip. I don't even remember where we were going. Maybe a science museum. That part doesn't matter. What I do remember is the bus driver. He wasn't our usual driver. He was a substitute. And at one point, he looked at all of us through the rearview mirror and asked if we wanted to hear the scariest story in the world. Of course, every kid on that bus shouted, yes. He kept warning us that it was too scary, that we wouldn't be able to handle it, but that only made everyone want to hear it more. I remember him saying, this story starts on a county road, and that's where I missed it because I was the only kid on the bus wearing headphones. I had a brand new Walkman, and while everyone else listened to the driver, I just put on my headphones, turned up the volume, and tuned the whole thing out. After a while, my tape ended, and the second the music stopped, I realized something was very, very wrong. The bus had gone completely silent. Not normal quiet, not bored quiet. I mean completely dead silent. I looked up and every single kid on that bus was frozen, slack-jawed, wide-eyed, pale, like whatever they just heard had drained the life right out of them. I turned around to my best friend Isaiah, who was sitting behind me, and asked, hey, what's going on? He looked at me, closed his mouth slowly, and just stared. I asked him again, you okay? Why is everyone so quiet? Then I heard someone whisper from the front of the bus, and I'm pretty sure one of the kids said, don't tell him. Finally, Isaiah spoke. In this flat, strange voice, he said, he told us a scary story. I looked toward the driver. He wasn't saying anything anymore. He just stared straight ahead, hands on the wheel with this weird glazed look in his eyes. So I asked, what was it about? Isaiah said, can't tell you. I thought he was joking. I asked again, why not? But nobody answered me. Not him, not anyone. And if you've ever been on a bus full of school kids, you know, silence like that is not normal. It just doesn't happen. It felt like everyone on that bus had been traumatized at the exact same time. So I asked one more time, louder now, what was it about? And that's when the horn sounded. A truck was coming straight at us. The bus had drifted into oncoming traffic. The truck driver swerved at the last second, which probably saved most of our lives. But the crash still killed the bus driver. One student went into a coma. The bus spun out. A bunch of us were knocked unconscious. Later, rumors spread around school that the reason the crash happened was because the story was so terrifying that the bus driver and maybe even some of the students had fainted. I don't know if that's true. What I do remember is waking up afterwards, still in my seat, and seeing blue sky through the window. The day outside looked so normal. That's what made it feel wrong. There was smoke or steam rising from the wreckage, and all around me I could hear kids crying. Some of us were taken to the hospital. The rest were sent home. A few days later, when everyone except the kid in the coma had returned to school, I started asking people about the story. I asked a girl named Maria if she had heard it. She quietly said yes. I asked if it was really that scary. She nodded. Then I asked if it was the scariest story she'd ever heard. She immediately closed her notebook, got up from her desk, and moved away from me. Loud enough for the class to hear, she said, I don't want to talk to you, Joshua. A few kids laughed. I felt humiliated, but I kept asking anyway. I asked other kids from the bus. None of them would tell me, not even Isaiah. One day, I got so frustrated that I snapped at him. I said, dude, just summarize it. What was it even about? And I still remember exactly what he said. He looked at me and said, I'll tell you when I'm 55. I just stared at him. 55? And he said, I don't want to have to think about it. Just let it go. That answer stuck with me for decades. It became one of those mysteries that never really leaves your mind. One of those things you keep thinking about late at night, even when you know you should have moved on years ago. And then just last year, I found an old reminder in my Google Calendar. It said Isaiah's birthday 55. The moment I saw it, I understood why I had saved it. So, I reached out to him, partly to wish him a happy birthday, but mostly because I wanted to finally know the truth. We met for coffee, and the moment I saw him, I knew something was wrong. His eyes were yellowed. His face looked tired, older than it should have been. He smiled when he noticed my staring and said, "Pancreatic cancer. A few months, probably." I didn't even know what to say. We sat down, talked about life, caught up on everything we'd missed. Marriage, divorce, work, family, grandchildren, the usual stuff people talk about when they know time is running out. And then, before I could even ask, he raised a hand and said, "Before you ask, I'm not telling you that bus story." I tried to protest, but he just shook his head. He told me every single person who heard that story wished they hadn't. Then he leaned in and said very calmly, "I'm saying this with love. Don't ask. If you hear it, you'll wish you hadn't. Just let it go." And for the first time in my life, I actually listened. After that meeting, I accepted that I was never going to know that the mystery would die with them until yesterday. Yesterday, completely by accident, I finally heard it. I was at a local bar talking to someone when I overheard a woman at a nearby table say, "We were all telling scary stories," and the driver said, "Do you want me to hear the scariest story ever?" The second I heard that, my whole body locked up. I turned and looked at the table. It was a middle-aged woman. At first, I didn't recognize her. But then I noticed her brown curly hair and the way her mouth twisted slightly when she talked. It was Maria, the same Maria from that bus. The bar was loud, so I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. One of the people at her table gasped and asked if she was serious, and Maria said yes. She said all of it came true. She started listing names. Shinji fell into a coma. Devin's stepfather stabbed him. Mitsu died at her wedding when the cake was smashed into her face and one of the dowels went through her eye. People at the table were horrified. Then Maria said something that made my blood go cold. She said Isaiah was 55 when cancer got him. And then she said that he and she had been the last two. Then Maria lowered her voice and said there had been one other kid on the bus who hadn't heard the story. Me. And according to her, the driver had saved me for last. He said, "Joshua dies 3 days after he hears this." I felt my throat tighten, couldn't breathe. And then Maria said something even worse. She said the crash happened exactly the way the driver said it would. The truck, the coma, everything, every detail had come true. And then she said that for years they all secretly hoped that if nobody ever told me the story, maybe I'd never die. At that point, some kind of sound escaped me. Maria looked up. I think she recognized me, and I just turned and walked away. So now I know Isaiah was right. All of them were right. They weren't being cruel. They were protecting me. And after spending my whole life desperate to hear that story, I can honestly say this. I wish I never had.